Okay, so we've a nice little watercolour study to look at, and you can represent this however you want. I'm going to borrow our lovely Marilyn's idea to actually use something a bit straighter to get these lines. So I'm going to do the same. I'm just going to overlap these two big oranges here. I'm assuming that they're very similar sizes. It does help a little bit with our, I mean, there will be a little bit more kind of uh, wiggly, but we can do that, can't we? So my tip would be to start with, don't make your lines too dark. I might have to make mine a bit darker so you can actually see them on here. So I'm going to wiggle mine whilst I can and make this. There we go. So you should be able to see that now. And then we've got the other orange going across there, haven't we? The other segment of orange. I mean, you can always, it's really quite good to get some oranges, to get a piece of orange, even chop up half of one into some segments and just have a look at it because it does help us to really see all of those different fabulous shapes and contour lines and everything as well. There we go. And then we've got the other orange coming out the back here. Just got a bit of a flatter top there. That's the only thing. We've got to obviously be a bit careful if we're using a circular guide like this here. Now I'm going to have to, make this slightly less detailed there. There we go. And then I'm going to just slightly adapt the shape as well to make it a little bit more natural because it's feeling a little bit flat. So we can do that. We can just take a line, but we can just adapt it and make it a little bit more realistic. Like that. But I'm obviously drawing in some of this because I'll probably be a bit more precise with this one. Or I might be trying to be a bit loosish, but you could easily do the other way and just have nothing, and just put the colours in, you go for it. So the biggest difference with this really, and other work that we've done, so we're almost going to have to flip our thinking around that we've had for the last 4 weeks because we've been working on layering things up. And this is the opposite because we're not going to, we are going to put some layers on, but we can't do what we've done before because what we'll need to be doing with the watercolor is working light to dark. We're doing the opposite. And we can't put white watercolor over another color. It won't show up because it's much more transparent. So that's the biggest difference, that watercolors are transparent pretty much. Some of the darker colors are less transparent, but a lot of the colors, even the yellows and things, cannot be layered up over other darker colors. So each thing we're working on, what we'll need to do is work in light to dark. So you can work like light to dark on your whole orange if you want to, or you can work in sections of your orange. You decide as you're going along what you want to do. So I'm going to start I am actually going to start working on the pith and things like that. So all these little light coloured lines that separate the orange, then that's going to be the more complex bit. You could either have to avoid it full stop or, um, or pick the lines out with something. And I'm going to use a little craft knife to do that as well. But I'm going to try and leave a lighter colour in there a little bit, just so we can get to see some of these segments. And again, it's just a nice study to look at how all the different colours behave in there as well. Really nice. I'm just going to pop in some little segments, but you know, so you don't even have to do this amount of drawing if you prefer not to. It's completely, I'm going to leave it up to you. The thing is with watercolour, as everything else, you can choose how you do it. It's your painting. If you want to get in the detail, get into the detail. If you don't want to get into the detail, you know, keep it looser. It's your choice. There's so many different, you know, so many different ways of doing watercolor. You can go really bright with the pigments or really soft and loose and light with the pigments and not put more water in, make them more washy. So there's an awful lot of choice really as to what you can do. So I'm just going to pop a couple of little layers on of these different colours of pith here. Keeping it as light as I can, but obviously mine's not going to be quite as light as yours because um you're going to, otherwise you won't be able to see what I'm doing at all. So it's a bit of a compromise there, which is fine. And then, you know, just deciding how you're going to separate all your little pithy bits. But yeah, it's really nice. It's nice to do it. So one of the biggest things, once you've got a few things kind of mapped out, is just having a think about testing really, testing your colours, because we haven't been doing this for a while and might have forgotten what kinds of colours come out when we mix them. So I've got a little bit of tester paper. I know I always use this, but I do particularly with watercolour because when you're watering them down, you don't always know what colour they are as well. But the thing to observe within this is all of the different tones. So that obviously when that's flat, it's fairly similar, but you know, like this one's got some darker bits near the bottom. So we've got anything varying from almost lemony yellow and lighter colours all the way down to, you know, these kind of almost orangey reds and then really quite dark down here. Might even see that as purple. You'll have to see what you think. Or reds down here, or even like crimsony colours. So there is contrast. And again, how much contrast you use is entirely up to you. So if you like it nice and light, you know, you like a more traditional looking watercolour, and you like to water down your paint a lot, then, you know, you probably won't go quite as dark as a contrast. Um, but you might, so you won't know till you do it. So I would always say, because we're starting lighter anyway, go light to start with, and then we can darken up as we go. So I'm going to go in with this orange first here. So what I want to be thinking about is all the different kinds of colours that I can see. Now, you can go in with a wash and then use a little bit of tissue paper or a little bit of I've got a bit of kitchen oil, and you can dab some dots out, or we can try and put a bit of salt in. I'll just do it. Or you could just use a little brush, like something like the edge of a little fan, and like get in some of that, you know, those little dots and things. So it's how we represent texture. You know, you might not put much on, it's up to you really. Um, so I've just got a couple of rounds. I've got a little fan brush as well. There. Just move that sword brush out of the way. And then we're just mixing up the colour. Now, if you're all using pencils, what I'll do, I'll just start with the pencils. The least, use the least. So with pencil, you can paint, you can colour and shade the whole thing in. Sometimes people use like little round circular motions so that they're getting into the grain of the paper, just nice and softly. Now, you can press hard and have more pigment, or you can go much lighter and have less. You can, if you haven't got exactly the right shade, you can layer up different, two different colours. Sometimes because sometimes when you've got a set of 12 pencils, there's not an awful lot of choice. So you can actually, you know, just change the tone. But again, a lot of it is to do with pressure, how much pressure you add with how much pigment with these. So you can do the whole thing, get it all set out. And then when you put in the water on is work light to dark still. So, if you were doing this, you'd be working this light bit first around the outside and any of the little bits in between on here will be slightly different. So, when you come to wet it, then you can start to use a little brush, a little bit of water on your brush and start to move that colour around. So that's why it's quite good to test these first if you are using watercolours pencils, because you don't really know how much pressure you're going to use sometimes. So like there, that tone is so different to that. So if I practice with how much pressure I need to draw it with first on this one, look, I mean, how so different those three tones. And that's got the most pressure. This one's got quite a bit of pressure, this orange. But of course you could go in much thinner with that, much lighter. And then that's got two colours on it. That's got orange and, sorry, red and yellow on it. So it's just all, that's really to test out. So there you go, with the watercolour pencils. And people sometimes like to add them in as well. So I'm just going to go in now. I've got a pan, I've got some pan watercolours. And so I'm going to look at all the tones I want to try and mix up. So I want these lighty orangey ones in here. And I might just do the two oranges at the same time. What we're trying to do as well with things like oranges and fruit, just check as well, like if you've had a bit of green, for example, I'm just going to take that off because it's a little bit green. So I'm just going to just dab out the centre of my centre of that, just to make sure it's not got any kind of muddiness in it. To keep it nice and keep those nice warm tones. Sometimes if you get a bit of blue in it, it gets this greyish tinge. But it's lovely. It's really relaxing, this. Get sucked in. Sucked into the lovely process. I'm going light, and again, I'm going to test it on this tester paper to see if there's too much pigment in for me. Now, if I wanted to water that right down, then you can go really thin with it. Not much pigment in there. And then I'm going to just test my other colours. I've got all sorts of orangey yellows as well in here. So again, I've got to be a bit careful because there's a little bit of blue left in that palette. You think you've got it out and you haven't. So again, we just, because then we can, mix them together. So that's warmer. That's more of a cadmium yellow. It's erring towards, got more red in it than this yellow here. And then we've got all sorts of orange. You might have orange in your kit as well. With the pan, you tend to get more colours than the tubes. And the tubes, again, it's just working out how much of your tubes that you need to squirt out, because usually they're quite heavily pigmented and you need hardly any paint out of the tubes. So again, it's just like working out how much you need to actually really water it down. So I'm just watering that down a bit more. Oh, I like that though. It's making me feel cheerful. Oh, liking the oranges. So, then when we're at a point where we think, oh yeah, I'll use that tone, or you can just, and this is the same as anything. It's your representation. So if something feels really nice, the colour, and go with that. And I'm looking for some kind of more ready oranges down here. Okay, that's really building up quite strong. So when you've got them all together, you'll be able to check. It's quite orangey, ready orange, isn't it, that one? There's one in between it I might just try. Okay, that's a bit more in between. And then I'm also going to go try and get out it's really dark at the bottom, but I don't want to go in with black or anything, so I think that'll just be too dark. So I'm going to go in with alizarin and crimson, which is, just leave it there, which is that one. Get more on my brush. And I'm wondering, if I put that right down at the bottom quite thickly, it will just be shadowy enough, shadow-like enough. Actually, I don't think that one is. That was in crimson. I think it's one tone out on there. Right, there we go. So I've got plenty of colour choices there. So the thing is, the key is, if a lot of this is dependent on how warm your room is that you're working on as well. So if it's cooler in your room, it'll take longer to dry. So you might end up with you might, so again, if you want some of the colours to run into each other, that's fine. But if you don't want them to run into each other, for example, I'm not going to put that darker on until it's dried quite a bit because I don't want it to go into the orange everywhere. I want it to, stay. But I don't want a kind of a big line everywhere. So I'm just going to wait till it's almost dry. But it's one of those things you just have to kind of work out for yourself as you go, really, because um, it's one of those things you kind of explore as you go along and just start to push the paint around with your brush. Now you can leave some light marks if there's anything that's got a highlight on it as you're going along. But if you're finding that you find that really difficult, then just get a little bit of tissue. And if there's anywhere that's got a particular highlight, then just pull it out. We can also take out some with the palette with a knife if we've got some obvious ones. I find it easy to take it out as I'm going. And then I'm going to start to add some other colours, see if I can get it to, see if I can get some of these oranges in a bit now. And I'm quite happy for them to, at the end here, I'm quite happy for those to blend because it's not a big transition. So that's okay. And actually the paper's doing quite a good job there of getting the texture of the orange because it's quite a textured paper. So I'm working these in between and it's blending a bit, but not running, it's not going mad running into it. So I'd obviously left it a little bit enough. But we can get a cauliflower shape sometimes and there's nothing you can do. It just depends on if the watercolour decides there's too much on the paper and might run into the other bit as well. And then, again, if you wanted to start in that to add some other bits of colour in there, you can drop those in. Or if you decide it's too much colour already, then, leave it until it's got a bit drier. So let's get some of these in. Might need to be a bit neater than me. I was just rushing that a little bit. So, use the brush to kind of bring it around for you. And bring some of that yellow in this side as well, because we're just observing where all the light's going. If it's a bit lighter down there, helps us with the shapes. So it might be that you've got something that's a cross between two tones and you're just gradually getting it darker as you go in. Or it might be that you want to start to drop those brighter colours in there. And again, it's just working through and trying to decide. you know, where to stop with it. With the you know, letting it run one colour into another. Now, whilst it's quite wet, if you wanted to try, if you wanted to have a little go at the salt, kind of getting that dappled effect, then drop it on whilst it's quite wet and leave it on there the duration. So I'm going to just put a few here. The thing with salt is you never know really, it's a bit of a surprise how it's going to behave. Sometimes it pulls it in one direction and it's not supposed to. And so it's definitely something to do just to have a little go with and not worry too much about it. Something to explore. I'm just dropping a few of these darker colours through here. And then I'm looking and I'm trying to work this in before it gets wet. So this is where it's always a little bit of always a bit of a balance with watercolour because, you know, sometimes you don't want a big line. You want to continue to work in different, you know, some of these colours. So you've just got to go with it and do what you think. Sometimes the judgment's a little bit, you know, because we just don't know if it's going to dry. And other times we're fine with it. So I'm just going to continue to drop these things in, these colours in and see what happens. But all we can do is just keep dropping the paint in. It will reach capacity as well of how much we can pop in. But yeah, there's some lovely, we get some really, really nice, fun kind of shapes and colours in there. So I am bringing a line down there because there's more of an, I'd say there's more of an obvious shadow. We keep dropping in. And then again, I'm dropping in these deeper, so we're keeping, you know, keeping those shadows, getting those shadows in. So I think I'm going to go somewhere just between the orange and the red here, because I'm feeling it's slightly lighter. And then I'm going to get darker, but I think it's still a bit damp here, so I might need to just, between there and there, I'm just going to let it dry just that little bit before I go in really dark. I can put the bottom bit in. Now I could even go darker by dropping in, you know, something else like a brown colour or something to make it really dark. Burnt umber or something. Rather than, I mean, you could go in with blue. Blue's quite opposite on the spectrum, so I'm going to stick with brown for now because it's slightly warmer tone. So often when we've done shadows, I've gone in with blue, but I'm just going to stick with that mixing brown with this for that reason, because it's very similar. I'm just still dropping these colours in at the bottom. Just so it's very dark at the bottom. So that's maybe needed to dry just a little bit more because it's kind of bleeding into the other colours a little bit. So I'm going to wait now and let that dry off a little bit more. But again, you know, you can start to kind of work in some of the other really shadowy colours to get that real contrast between them. And just see what happens. You know, as I said, it's trial and error all the time. Good fun though, really good fun. Really nice. So I'm just looking at the top of the orange as well. It is quite light there. I'm just going to wash off my brush for a minute. I might, to be fair, what I might just do is just neaten this edge off before it dries hard. I might just end up with a bit of a just neaten the edge off. Otherwise, I might have you know, like a watermark there before I've had time to just to do that. So I was just thinking about little things like that. Really fun. I mean, you can even try if you wanted to. I mean, obviously I've got some salt in there, but you could even try just dabbing your brush in if you wanted to do that, just to see what happens. Sometimes with watercolour, you know, it just like I'm seeing this, it's pulling it around a little bit, and I'm not sure I'm going to like the effect, but you don't know. But that's the beauty of it. It's a bit like a surprise. You're never quite sure what's going to happen with it. It's the least reliable because obviously we're dealing with a lot of water and water moves in its own way completely. So I'm just going to go in, just get a little bit of this where the top. And again, I'm just using my knowledge of um, how we'd get a little bit of maybe depth in there where the top of the orange is around it. And also where we might get, so I probably want a light bit on there as well. And I might be able to scratch that out at the end. You know, where the tops of these are. Might be that you've got a slightly deeper colour or something to add in, but it's lovely to observe all of this, all the different tones that we've got. Really nice. I'm just going to hang on and leave that to dry for a moment, and then I might have a little look at this orange over the side here and just have a little dabble with that really, and look at some similar colours to have used already. Get some more colours prepared, and then I'll come and chat to everybody in a moment. It's just nice to keep, I don't want to stop you working either, because when you are, it's one of those things, sometimes if you start chatting, it'll dry. And you might be thinking, no, I'm on a bit, I need to keep the paint moving. I think there's a lot of it with watercolour is how to keep your paint moving. Right, so I'm going to go in again with a light one here. Try and leave, again, some of these slightly lighter highlights out. Or paint them in, that's the other thing you can do, is paint those in. And then again, start to drop in all these lovely colours and tones that we can see. Really nice. But, we can represent them in your own way anyway. That's the beauty of it. Just let the colours run and see what happens a bit. Round brushes work really well with the watercolours because you just kind of just pull and push that water around is what we're doing a lot really with this. For sure. Just dropping in the other colours there. There's some little bits missing. Might be some little bits missing where, you get little highlights, so you can leave that out. Or you can try the salt if you want to. I'm going to leave my salt off this one, just leave it on that one. And then just starting to drop in some of these darker colours as we get into the shadows. Some on that side. I'm just going to go back in over here, pop a little bit down there. And just bringing that down as well. So we're just thinking all the time about, what to put in. I'm going to go back in and just take a little bit of this colour out where it's slightly lighter at the edge here. Just dab it off with a little bit of kitchen roll. But all we're doing really is, trying to work out where those lighter bits are as we're going through. Usually where there's a shine on something, isn't it? It's more obvious. And then again, when you feel it's dry enough, go back in and with your darkest colour, wherever you've got a really dark bit, So I'm just going back in here and I'm just dropping it in a little bit. But it's always, the tricky thing is to know when is it going to be dry enough to do that. So you just got this trial and error. And then again, you know, thinking about the tops as well. What colour you want to put those in at. And also when it's the right time, because um, you don't want to put it in if it's everything's soaking and it all goes everywhere. So yes, just have a really good play around with it, really. Now I can see on here where this salt is normally supposed to leave it and then it'll kind of move it around. So, but obviously I'm doing a demo, so I can't shake it at the end, but I can see, you can see where it's pulling the paint about. And sometimes that doesn't always give you the effect. I actually prefer this one without the salt on this one. But if I'd got tiny bits of salt, it might have been more subtle, the mottling, but obviously it's created this big cauliflower, which I don't like the effect of that on mine. So I'm just going to see if I can do something about it, although it may be too late, to be fair. Quite often, by the time it's cauliflower, there's nothing you can do. But that's okay. If something's not quite gone to plan, that's fine. That's how watercolours are sometimes. I'm going to just drop a little bit more dark colour in here where there's a subtle change on down there. Might be too wet actually, I might have to wait. Wait on there. But I'll take a little pause at that point and come back to you. And it's really just, as I said, it's about exploring and seeing what effects you can get with different things. Um, and just we have to let go. I think we have to really let go with watercolour. If we are using quite a lot of water, it's just like, okay, it may not. Right, just take a pause there, see how you're all getting on. Okay, so just keep working through really. We're looking at the next bit now. So I'm going to go lighter and then darker. So I'm looking and I'm not feeling that this is really white or anything. It's quite a very light one. So I'm just going to thin down a colour, you know, one of these colours very thinly. So I might go something, it's not too warm. It's a bit creamy that, isn't it? So what I might actually do, this is where I might actually add a little bit of white from the pan to make it more pastely. So it's not, again, it doesn't cover, but you can add it to another colour to make it feel a bit more pastely in tone. Let's just see what that is like here. It's still quite bright. So let's get a bit more, thin that down a bit. I'll have to start a new one here. We'll get a little bit of lemon yellow there. Plenty of water to water it down. And then we're going to go in with this white. Try that again. Okay, that's looking more like it. I'm going to go in with a little bit more white in there. Because people are always a bit confused as to how to use white in a watercolour set, but you know, I just tend to use it a more to get pastel colours. So probably could even get away with thinning that down even more, to be fair. Even less colour in there. And then I'm going to probably leave a little whiter bit of pith around there, and then probably work in these other tones. But I'm seeing like underneath there's a dark one, but I'll put that on last. So then it's just deciding, what colours you're going to add around that. So it may be to stop it running. I'm dotting this on actually, but it might be that you to stop it running into the other colour, that you leave a bit of a gap, but it's entirely up to you. Let's just have a little play first and see. It's probably not quite as dark as that, so I'm just going to put a little bit more. But we interpret this in our own way as well. That's the other side of it, you see. So that's now running in there. That's running into the centre, which I don't want it to do. So that's clearly still too damp. You just got to be a little bit careful with where you add it and how far that line comes down. Might need to leave it all together to dry a bit more. It looks a little bit like it would be quite nice to let it run in a bit because the colour does transition a little. But yeah, mine's just running in. So I'm going to hang on a little bit for that bit. I'll come back if it's a little bit more dry and work on the middle and then come back to the outside. The great thing is when you've got segments of things like this, you can do that. You can go in with a colour and just work into that colour for a bit. No problem. While the other bit's drying, etc. You could even come back to it and work on the leaves if you wanted to. So it's then just thinking, what other areas can you work on and what other colours can you actually, I'm going to come back to this now because it's really dry, having said that. So it's just dropping in. And again, it's representing it in your own way because this isn't a picture. We're not trying to paint this picture, this photo, because it's a photo. So it's how you interpret it your own way as well. Remember, that's really important. Really interesting, you see, once you've done something like one, that to go say do a lemon or another fruit, would be really interesting too. Again, I'm just going to be careful. I'm not going to let that drag into the other. So I'm just going to go around and pull that out with a bit of tissue. Thank goodness for tissue. with watercolours, is all I can say. Until I'm going around here. And I'm just going to leave a little bit of an edge around there. I might just neaten it off a little bit so it's a bit more, less kind of, it's a little bit straighter. So I might just work into that a tiny bit just to straighten some of it off. But I might not as well do too much. I might just put a slightly darker colour, but not as dark as is in it. Otherwise I might end up with a cauliflower there. I'm just trying to neaten this up a little bit actually. Just a tad. I've had to stamp a bit of tissue to do that. Right, okay, let's carry on. So I'm just going to start to work on some of the text, some of the little segments of the orange really. Again, we can see which are slightly darker and we can just have a little go at dropping some of those in. It's quite yellowy, isn't it? This one. It's amazing when you look at the tones on there. Hmm. So let's see. So we've got these nice bright ones. And you might even, just go back and just check your colours again, if that helps you to decide, which ones are near, because, when you've come away from doing one tone of things, it can be quite tricky just to decide. So I'm looking for a contrast here with an orangey one. But that might be too bright compared. This bit at the bottom is a slightly darker. So what you could add there is something like a touch of this colour, like a touch of burnt sienna or something. Where has it gone? So you can see it there. These sienna colours are a bit more natural. So you could always drop in a touch of that. So it's just got a little bit less, still quite bright. So I need to add water. But yes, you could add in something like a touch of the sienna colour to it, and take out a little bit of warmth, but have some still in. That's what I'm going to do with that one, I think. Just water it down that bit more so it's not too bright. Okay, I'm getting there now. Getting there now with the colour tones. And then this nice bright bit at the top here. So I'm just going to start to, and I'm just going to kind of wiggle mine about. Leave the very top of it as though it's catching the light. You can kind of just wiggle your brush and leave little lines between it for the texture if you want to, or you can just explore, another way of doing it. Let's get these sienna-y colours in now for the bottom there. You can also kind of make some little lines with your paper as well, if that helps. But we can also scratch them out, which I'll show you. Yeah, so you can just literally leave a little mark in there if that helps. Mine's run over the edge here whilst I was concentrating on something else. So you can, if it's damp enough still, you can just put a wet brush in and try and kind of work it out. Move the paint around a little bit and wash it out. That's okay, it's not too bad. Sometimes it dries fast and you just can't get it out, but sometimes you can just save it. So I'm going to go and just work in the shadow bits now underneath, you know, where we're getting a bit of a shadowy bump there, like we did down here. And then the same on this bit. Or it might be you want to work a little bit more the darker colours in to get those segments a little bit more, which is what you could do. Again, it will depend on how, I'm going to have to wait till it's a bit drier, I think, because it's not really going to go in at the moment. And I can actually get some little wiggly lines in there that look a bit more like segments as I go. Just go on to this one. So I'm going to do the same here as I have here and work these in. But again, you just, you know, have a little explore of all the different colours and tones. Some might be lighter. There's not a huge difference, is there, in those? So between them. Just again, how you decide you're going to represent it, whether you're just going to put it all on or whether you're going to put on, you know, wiggle the colours in and then darken off some. It's up to you. I'm going for the wiggle option. I'm just kind of putting a little bit of edge down in there as well. Tend to get that between in the shadows anyway. And we're just working them in. I mean, there is still some layering process when we've got watercolour, but it's a little bit less. It's a little bit less, you know, because of the way we can only layer one in one way up. Then when we do it the other way, so I think that's why it's a little bit quicker as well. Yeah, and then whenever you feel, able to, you can go in and darken any of those layers that are in there. Pop in the other colours you wanting to pop in. When you feel you've reached a point where you can and it's not going to run where you don't want it to. Not a huge variation in this one. It's a few darker areas, but still nice and fascinating, isn't it? So I'm going to go in once it's kind of almost dried off, and then work in some of these darker colours again. I'm going to go in for these similar ones, these burnt sienna tones, these brown tones, really warm, earthy tones, are lovely. A bit of orange, just darken off. But again, it's just having to wait until your areas are drying off to work them in. I'm letting mine spread a little bit, but I don't want them to necessarily, run into all of the colours. So it's just that control, isn't it, as to when you're able to add your colours in. Very relaxing for the mind. I'm darkening around the lightest bit in the middle as well, just to make it a little bit pop out a little bit more. Keep darkening it. Observe where all of the little shadows go at the bottom as well. Again, that will make your segments pop. Well, they might not all have, dark areas around, but we can just check in case they do. And we can just add them some darker ones in there just to help them jump out. Just keep working those different tones through. Might even be a brighter tone that you've got going on. And you can just keep adding a bit more depth until you're happy. You might have started out quite light and thought, actually, I can go a bit brighter now. And start to add them. Or you might keep it nice and wash it. It depends on, on your style as well. So you want to keep it a little bit in keeping with what you've already got on there. But if you've got a lot of depth already, then you might want to add a bit more depth on there with this. I'm just adding a little bit more colour now to the orange on the outside as well. Building things up, and that's why it's always good to start lighter, because then as you go you can start to build up or pare back, and just make things lighter if you're not sure. It does help. But yeah, however it comes out will just be to do with, the style as well of the painting. So just enjoy doing, enjoy whatever comes out. I'm going to go in here and just kind of dot these on a little bit darker now. On the bottom here where there's like how. And then I'm going to finish off with these little leaves, then we'll come back and have a little chat, final little chat in a little bit. But I'm just kind of putting a tiny bit of shadow behind up here as well. Just a very broken line, otherwise it can look a little bit false. Right, a little look for the leaves now. So again, leaves are really interesting because you just get these different tones. Some might be a bit yellowy in colour, some might be a little bit missing up. Oh, I'm not showing it back. I'm just going to go on there. There we go. Some might be a little bit kind of yellow green. So you've just got to work out what the tones are. If you only have one green, you can always add a bit of yellow to it. If you've got sap green, you can add, a slightly darker colour to it as well. I don't know if you got reds or something to make it a bit darker. It's not really quite the right colour. So I'm going to go in with a sap green over here, which is typically a colour for foliage. And then we can use that to just mix in with a bit of yellow. That produces some of this yellow here. That'll make it more of like kind of more of a yellowy green. And then what else could we have? So you could add a bit of blue to a bit of green, or a bit of brown to a bit of green. So I'll just get a little bit of green out over here. And then, or red. Oh, I think I'll go for brown actually. Go for a dark one. And that'll give us that shadow. But you could go for a blue tone, mix it with a blue tone. But again, just test them, make sure you've got them colour that you want, or even a Payne's grey would work. If I wanted to go darker than that, so I'm add a bit of blue actually. There we go, that's better. It's instant, isn't it, a change there. So when we're painting them on, we're just mindful of going light first. And then again, you might want to take, if you've got any really light bits that come out, you might want to just take a little bit of that out, just lift it slightly. Sometimes you get like the middle section where the vein is lighter. We can scratch that out after as well. Maybe we'll leave that on purpose, we can do that. And then I'm just adding any other brights to it, like a bit of, if it's a bit yellowy in tone, you can add a bit of yellow green. It's quite bright over here. It all blends together quite nicely while you're doing it this way anyway. And then if you've got any slightly darker ones in, any little bits that are a bit, it's like around here. That's where we're getting it darker, aren't we? Because it's naturally a shadow around where the orange is. We'd expect to see that really, where that is there. You might even see it at the tip. Sometimes you get a little bit of a darker. And then right, so it's quite wet in a minute. So I'll go on to this one. And again, we've got two halves almost there. I'm just pulling a line out here. And then we want to add, add the darker ones in. So to make some more up actually. Sap green. And some blue. And then we can bring in any other tones that you're seeing. And then the same one here. And we do pretty much have kind of these bands of colours on these leaves. And again, these need building up, so they'll be a funny shape for a while, so don't worry. Just persevere. To get a little bit of an edge, where you've got some Right. So I'm going to darken this off. So what we're looking at then is we're just looking at the values, of these colours. Where do we want to make anything darker, for example? And just work through in a bit of a system, really. So I know down here I want to make this darker in this leaf. I'm just going to dab in some darker colours. Bring that darker in there. I would quite like a little lighter line through there, which I've not quite managed, but I think I'm going to do that with, I think I'll scratch that off after, so that could be a good idea to show. So I'm going to pause there for a moment, and then come back to you, and then I'll just do that little bit of scratching at the end. So just take a final break there. Okay, so I'm just going to now, you could leave yours on a bit longer. The salt can stay on overnight actually, but yeah, so I'm not overly happy with my salt, to be fair. It's given me a big cauliflower there, which I'm not as keen on. I could work into it, but I'm not going to do that tonight. So obviously I've left quite a few little white bits anyway, but you can just scrape the top of the paper off. You've got any other little light bits, and this isn't something I've really, I've turned my knife upside down. I suppose you could turn it that way. But it just scrapes the top of the paper off, so that if you've got any, anywhere where you want to pick out some areas where you want a little bit more light, for example, it's not really working there, is it? If you've got like some of the light of the orange, or you've got you can do this with any watercolor. So rather than actually reserving the areas of white, you can just pick them off with a bit of, but I do it when it's dry, otherwise it'll pull, like makes them. But you can do that, and scrape those off. There's a few in this little bit on the edge. So again, just work your way through where you need to go, wherever there's any light source, really. I was going to do it with this, wasn't I? So where this leaf is coming here, the vein, I'll just pull it off. That one's still a bit wet, so it's not really possible. There we go. So yeah, so that's another way of doing it without reserving the white or using a masking fluid, which is quite nice. A bit in here as well. But you could literally just go through, like I've left these bits, you could go through and just put some of these shapes back in, like that, quite easily. But it's quite interesting that, isn't it? Anyway, it's just a different technique to use. Where else I've got, we might have some, so there might be a bit more here. Yeah. Raping it out. And that's it, really. That's all I've got to show you with that. But it's just another way of helping with the light.